Heroes. The heroic, the brave, bold main character who we root for, who we as an audience tag along with for this story, who we align with, sympathise with, a person the film makes us wish we were. But what happens when that's all flipped? What happens when our main character isn't so heroic? When, rather than save the day, they'd rather burn it down? What happens when our hero is the villain? What is a hero? A hero often goes hand in hand with the role of the protagonist or main character, someone we can root for and who drives the plot forward. When researching into Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces theory, we can see how our conventional hero fits into a specific narrative structure. Paraphrasing it here, our hero begins our story in a state of equilibrium. We are introduced to them and their world as they are. Everything is neutral. Then they have a problem, an issue, a catalyst that forces them into the story. This is when Frodo gets the ring, when Hogarth saves the giant, and when the spider bites the man. It's the turning point in our character. Skipping around a bit here, we then get our hero's trials and training. This is when Luke trains with Yoda, when the blue kid in Avatar 2 makes friends with the whale, and when the man learns what it means to be Spider. Our conventional hero then sets out for the big bad of the film, stepping into Act 3, which usually goes something like this. Hero gets defeated, but then not really, then they win, and now they've changed by the end of the film. Truman learns to think for himself, Neo becomes the one, and the man becomes the Spider. Man. But that's all well and good for a conventional do-good hero. But like I asked, what happens when instead of depicting a hero as our main character, the filmmakers make us follow a villain? Now, I'm not talking about anti-heroes, as they usually have some input on fighting the large evil, yet maybe a little morally ambiguous. I'm talking about our protagonist being the larger evil. Unlike our hero character, the villain doesn't have a clear narrative structure. They are just a force of evil. Their motives are not to save the world or overcome a fear. They are the evil and often know it. But why? Why do these films exist? What is the point of making us follow a character who has no morals? How are we as the audience supposed to connect to them? Are the filmmakers trying to get us to sympathize with them? No, but instead, something much more sinister. This brings us to my theory behind these villain films, and that is the elevator theory. You see, we begin the film and enter a metaphorical elevator with these villainous main characters. We are stuck in the perspective of them, a companion even. In the case of Jean-Luc Godard's 1960 French New Wave flick, Breathless, the main character of Michel takes us on a ride in his car as he runs away from the cops and even murders one, all while turning to the spectator and talking to us as if we are in on his joke, as if we have the same nihilistic views as him.
N'aimez pas la ville? Allez vous faire foutre.
Being trapped in this elevator makes us as the audience feel terrible. Positioning us in the perspective of a villain makes it hard not to feel as though you are being judged, as if the film is asking, why are you with this utterly evil character? In the case of Joel Schumacher's I'm gonna go with Schumacher. In the case of Joel Schumacher's 1993 film Falling Down, we watch as a man driven to madness due to everyday stress goes on a rampage. Let's take a look at this film's convenience store scene, in which the main character terrorizes a cashier after having to buy something to get change for the phone. Here, the film highlights consumerism as well as capitalism, with our main character threatening the cashier and asking how much things are around the store. Throughout the film, his character is hit by such mundane, down-to-earth frustrations that all of the audience can relate to, such as prices in the store being higher than usual, or being stuck in traffic. But the way he takes his anger out on these little issues is in such an extreme way. In this scene, we see our main character making racist remarks towards the cashier and ends with him wrecking the store. The film is trying to trick the audience into aligning with him by relating to his issues, but then pulling back when being disgusted by his actions. This type of highlighting of ideologies is what gives our villains motives, whether it's nihilism or anti-capitalism. This, however, is different to the way an anti-hero might be depicted. Take Trainspotting's Renton, for example. This main character is a nihilistic, anti-capitalist heroin addict. And while he doesn't have very good intentions, he isn't depicted as a villain. Instead, we are treated as Renton's friend, unlike the unwilling accomplice that most of these types of films position the audience into. When watching any film, we as the spectator choose for ourselves which characters we dislike and which characters we like. Most often the filmmakers aim to make us root for our protagonist and hate the antagonist. According to theorist Murray Smith, spectatorship comes in 3 waves: alignment, allegiance, and identification. Starting with alignment, this is the point in our film where we as a spectator acknowledge who the main character is and align with their story, following them throughout it. This usually happens very quickly after being introduced to said character. Look at the opening scene of Eternal Sunshine. We start with a fade-in of Joel waking up. We start our film as he starts his morning. Already we align with his story, starting as he does. We follow him outside as he goes about his morning, and we start to hear his voiceover as if he's talking to us. We align with him here and acknowledge that he is our main character and who we will follow throughout this film. We haven't heard what he has to say yet or what he does, so we can't exactly root for him yet, but we can definitely align with him as our protagonist. But looking at the alignment stage when it comes to our protagonist being the villain, we are forced to follow them. Going back to my theory, the alignment is what pushes us into that elevator, forcing us to stick with the monster. According to Smith, the next stage of audience spectatorship is the allegiance stage. Here, we as the audience choose whether or not we are on the character's side. We've acknowledged that they are who we will follow in a sense of watching their story, but allegiance is if we'll follow their morals and beliefs. Looking at Bong Joon-ho's 2006 film The Host, we align with our main character Gang-do, I think that's how you say his name, I don't know, and understand that he is our main character. We first meet him asleep on the job, and when he wakes up, he is just an all-round slob, but we sympathise with him. Despite being a deadbeat dad to his daughter, Hyunseo, I'm just gonna go with that, we acknowledge that he is trying to become a good father, saving up pennies to get her a new phone. When Hyunseo is captured by the big fish monster thing, the allegiance stage kicks in, and we begin to root for our main character, as we want him to rescue his daughter. We have both aligned with him as a character and allegianced? I don't know, but we've done that with him and his goals. We want him to succeed. But looking at a film like American Psycho, we can see how the filmmakers play with us when it comes to our allegiance with Patrick Bateman. In the opening scene of the film, Patrick and his business associates are talking over dinner, or more gossiping, I guess. When one of them makes an offensive joke, Bateman pipes up and confronts him saying,
"Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks."
"So surely we should like Patrick, right? He's showing he's against the offensive comments made by his friend." But there's something strange about how he says it. Something's off. We can't quite tell if he's joking or not. He says it so animated. We continue to the next scene where we follow Patrick into a club, and by now we've aligned with him and acknowledged he is our protagonist. But here, the filmmakers do something quite clever, because this happens. Patrick gives a friendly smile, followed by a punch to the gut, as he reveals to the audience the psycho he is. Now, a typical film wouldn't do this. The writer and the filmmaker would push the audience into the direction of liking the main character, being on their side. Blake Snyder theorizes that to make a character likable, you must do what he calls the save the cat scene, with the most basic example of a character saving a cat from a tree. Writers do this with the intention of showing the audience the character doing something good and therefore winning them over. For example, Aladdin is a thief, so why should we root for him? Well, he's kind-hearted and he gives these starving children bread that he stole. But in these types of films, we get the opposite. A scene to show the true, horrific side of the main character. American Psycho goes so far to have a literal opposite of the Save the Cat, in which an ATM machine tells Patrick to feed it a stray cat.
Stop that!
You see, the allegiance stage gives us a choice. While we are stuck in this elevator with Patrick, we can check out at an allegiance level, and hopefully all of the audience does. We don't want to feel like we are on the character's side, but it's risky. There is no getting out of the elevator as far as alignment goes. We are stuck in here. We have to follow our protagonist, the villain. The last stage of Smith's theory is identification, and this is when the spectator may or may not personally identify with the character. For example, a dad might really identify or connect with Shrek in Shrek the Third when he shows the green man learning to, be a dad and having these little baby shits. Or, another example is someone who's recently gone through a breakup might connect with Joel in Eternal Sunshine, because, that movie is sad, I don't know. This, however, is where we get to some dark territory when it comes to looking at these kind of films with villains as our protagonist. If a spectator connects with a character who has questionable morals, who's the bad guy, who's chasing people with a chainsaw and then dropping it on their heads with really weirdly perfectly accurate aim, then it gets a little worrying. But the filmmakers behind these films, while they don't exactly want you to go out with a chainsaw and chase people, they do want you to feel an uncomfortableness within your own head. They play with you. Spend so much time with a character and you start seeing through their eyes. You might find yourself slipping. Maybe you like this elevator. Maybe you're just like them. Hopefully not. Going back to American Psycho, I know I'm talking a lot about this film, but I bought it on Blu-ray, so I'm gonna get my fucking money's worth, you best believe. Anyway, in American Psycho, there's a scene between Bateman and Willem Dafoe's character, Detective Donald Kimball, I think. In this scene, Detective Kimball is investigating the disappearance of Paul Allen. Paul Allen. Let's see Paul Allen's cock. A man who Patrick murdered. Despite Patrick of course being the villain here, a monstrous killer, we begin to feel the tension in the scene. We are afraid of the possibility of Kimball solving the case and catching Patrick. Why though? Surely the moral thing would be to root for Dafoe in this scene. He's a good guy, and it's not like he's acting dickish about the situation and becoming aggressive with Patrick. Instead, he has a very calm and friendly demeanor. So why? Well, being in this elevator with Patrick for so long, we have begun to not sympathize with him or his actions, but instead root for him in a way. The cinematographer puts us in his shoes in this conversation in a very subtle yet effective way. The scene begins with this shot to establish the two sat together. Notice the way they are framed and the glass divider behind them. Detective Kimball has the power in this scene, having the biggest frame behind him, whereas Patrick is shown to be weak for the first time in the film. The glass behind him frames him in this tight, trapped box. We then begin the conversation, and the filmmakers use your standard shot reverse shot. But watch how these shots are framed. When we look at Patrick, we are always over Kimball's shoulder, as if we are a third party to the dinner table. But every shot of Kimball we cut to gets closer and closer to Patrick's shoulder, as the conversation gets closer and closer to Patrick being caught. Then, boom, we see what Patrick is seeing, a pretty much POV, putting us in his shoes, making us as the audience as nervous to get caught as he is. The conversation continues from over-shoulder shots of Bateman and POV shots of Kimball, until this happens.
Where were you? Where was Marcus?
Kimball truly interrogates Patrick here, and after asking him where he was that night, we cut to a close-up shot of Bateman. The pressure is on, and we feel it too. This is a form of both allegiance and identification. Despite his villainous ways, we don't want him to get caught. So really, are we any better? What if we start to like the elevator? Floor after floor, our minds becoming more and more corrupted. You might start to question who you are. And then, when the elevator finally arrives at its floor, all that's left is what we've become. Sorry, that last part was really dumb. Bye.